Hey warriors! Your eyes open before the alarm does. Half a second of nothing, then the weight comes back. The argument you're still not over, the deadline breathing down your neck, the number on the scale you don't want to look at. That's the world walking in uninvited and starting the conversation for you. And here's the part nobody tells you. Whoever talks first owns the next 12 hours. If the world talks first, you spend the day catching up to a mood you didn't choose. If you talk first, you set the terms. The old Stoics figured this out a long time before sleep science had a name for it. They didn't wait around for motivation to show up on its own schedule, because motivation is unreliable, and they knew it. So they built something sturdier. Short verbal commands, single words carrying the weight of an entire way of living, said out loud before the day had a chance to say anything back. 5 of those words are still standing after 2,000 years. 5 words that got repeated by an emperor exhausted from running a war he didn't ask for, by a former slave who owned nothing but his own mind, by a man exiled to nowhere with everything he built stripped away from him. You're about to get all 5. Say them tomorrow before your feet hit the floor and watch what happens to the shape of your day. Think about how your worst mornings actually start. It's rarely the alarm itself. It's the 3 seconds right after it, when your brain hands you the full inventory before you've even sat up. The money you owe, the person who hasn't texted back, the version of yourself you were supposed to be by now. None of that is real yet. It's a preview, a trailer for a movie that hasn't started filming, and most people walk straight into the theater and sit down anyway, letting a preview run their whole day before a single real thing has actually happened to them. You don't have to take that seat. You get a say in what plays first, and that's the entire idea buried inside these 5 words. You don't need a perfect life to use these 5 words. You don't need to have your finances sorted, your body where you want it, or your relationships fixed before they'll work for you. That's actually the whole point of where they came from. These weren't written by people with easy lives who had the luxury of feeling calm. They were built by people whose circumstances gave them every reason to wake up defeated, and who decided the words came first anyway, before the feeling, before the proof, before anything outside of them agreed to cooperate. If it worked for a man running an empire under siege, it will work for you on a Tuesday that just feels heavier than it should. Comment the one word you already know you need the second you wake up tomorrow. You'll have 5 to pick from in a minute, but something in you probably already knows which one hits hardest. I own today. The first word is today, and it's the one that makes every other word on this list possible. Not tomorrow. Not when things calm down. Not the better version of your life waiting behind some future condition you haven't hit yet. Today, the only day you've actually been handed. The one currently slipping through your hands while you decide whether it's worth showing up for. You already know the trap. You tell yourself you'll start eating right next Monday. You'll start the business once you've saved a little more. You'll finally have the hard conversation once the timing feels right. Seneca called this out for exactly what it is. A person spending their entire life getting ready to live instead of actually living, arranging conditions that never quite finish arranging themselves. And by the time everything finally lines up the way you wanted, you've burned through the very days you were supposedly saving for later. Nobody gets those days back. Not the richest man alive, not you, not anyone. Here's what makes today different from a slogan on a coffee mug. It's not about hype, it's about math. Your whole overwhelming life, the career, the body, the relationships, the debt, the goals you've been dragging around for years. None of that is your job this morning. Today is your job. That's it. That's the whole assignment. Musonius Rufus taught his students that living well isn't a lesson you learn once and carry around like a certificate. It's a muscle, and muscles atrophy the moment you stop using them. Skip today, and you don't just lose today. You lose ground you'll have to fight to get back tomorrow. So, say it before you check your phone. Today, not the whole mountain, just the next 16 hours, the ones that are actually yours to do something with. Everything else can wait its turn. Picture the version of you 5 years from now, looking back at this exact stretch of your life. That future version isn't going to remember the 5-year plan you kept redrafting in your head. They're going to remember the Tuesday you actually made the call, the random Wednesday you finally started, the ordinary morning that quietly became the hinge everything else turned on. You don't get to pick which day that turns out to be in advance. You only get to decide every single morning whether today is going to be a wasted rehearsal or the actual hinge. Most days feel too small to matter, right up until you're looking back and realizing one of them was the one that changed everything, and you almost let it slide by like all the others. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying tomorrow's problems into today's hours, and it's the kind almost nobody notices they're doing. You're sitting at your desk today, but half your mind is already at next month's meeting that hasn't happened yet. You're eating dinner with people who love you, but part of you is replaying an argument from 3 years ago that's already over. That's not caution. That's not planning ahead. That's just handing today away to a version of time that isn't even real yet, and getting nothing back for the trade. Today is the word that closes that leak. It puts both feet back in the only hours you actually possess. Notice how much easier it is to promise big things to a future version of yourself than to actually deliver small things right now. Future you is going to wake up early. Future you is going to finally start therapy. Future you is going to have the hard conversation with grace and confidence. Future you sounds incredible. The problem is, future you doesn't exist yet, and by the time that day actually arrives, it isn't future you standing there, it's present you again, with the exact same doubts, the exact same tired legs, the exact same excuses that felt so easy to override when they belonged to someone hypothetical. Today collapses that whole trick. There is no future version coming to save the day. There's only whoever shows up this morning, and that's you, right now, with whatever you've actually got. You don't have to fix your whole life by tonight. You just have to not hand today over to the same excuse that took yesterday and the day before it. Maybe that means 1 honest hour of work instead of 0. Maybe it means 1 difficult text sent instead of drafted and deleted for the 5th time. The size of the action isn't the point. The point is that today got claimed instead of surrendered, and a life is nothing more than a long string of days that either got claimed or didn't. You're not being asked to win the whole thing this morning. You're being asked not to forfeit today's round. Comment how many Mondays you've promised yourself that never actually came, because the next word is about to make that a much harder habit to keep hiding behind. I am enough. The second word gets misread constantly, so let's clear it up before you say it. Enough is not permission to stop trying. It's the opposite. It's what lets you try with everything you have without needing the universe to sign off on the result. Epictetus drew one hard line and built his whole life around it. Some things are yours to control, and everything else simply isn't. Your effort, your choices, your attitude walking into the room, yours. The outcome once you've walked in, whether they hire you, whether it rains on your wedding day, whether the people you love treat you the way you deserve, was never fully yours to guarantee. Most of the suffering you carry around comes from confusing those two categories, spending your energy trying to control weather while neglecting the one thing that was actually in your hands the whole time. Think about how much of your exhaustion right now isn't even about what you did today. It's about a result you're still chasing that was never fully up to you to deliver. You gave the interview everything you had, and now you're spiraling over whether they liked you. You showed up for the relationship with your whole chest, and now you're carrying the weight of whether they show up back. Enough draws the line in the right place. You did your part, fully, without holding back. That was always the entire deal, and nothing about the outcome erases the fact that you kept your end of it. This is the word for the mornings you already feel behind before you've done a single thing. When you look at your bank account or your body or your unfinished goals, and the day starts with a verdict already stamped across it. Not enough. Behind. Failing. Say enough, and take that verdict back. You're not lowering the bar. You're refusing to let a scoreboard you don't fully control decide your worth before you've even taken the first swing today. Zeno of Citium built an entire school around a version of the same principle. What happens to you and what you do about it are two separate questions, and only the second one is actually yours to answer. He taught it in public, on an open porch where anyone walking by could stop and listen, because he wasn't interested in it being a private comfort for a small circle of the wealthy. It was meant to work for anyone standing in the street with nothing but their own effort to offer. Cleanthes, who came after him, put the same idea into a hymn, arguing that a person who fights the current gets dragged along anyway, exhausted, while a person who works with what's actually in front of them moves with far less suffering and gets just as far. That's not surrender. It's aim. You put your energy where it can actually land, instead of throwing it at a wall that was never going to move. Think about how much of your exhaustion right now isn't even about what you did today. It's the meeting that hasn't happened yet that you're already dreading the outcome of. It's the message you sent that hasn't been answered, and the story you've already written in your head about what the silence means. You gave the effort, fully, and now you're spending a second round of energy trying to control a response that was never going to be yours to control in the first place. Enough stops the bleeding right there. You did your part. That was always the entire deal, and nothing about how it lands afterward erases the fact that you kept your end of it. This doesn't mean you stop caring about the outcome. It means you stop letting the outcome hold your worth hostage while you wait for it to decide whether you're allowed to feel okay about yourself. You can want the promotion badly and still know that your value as a person was never actually riding on whether you got it. You can want the relationship to work and still know your effort inside it was real, regardless of how the other person chooses to respond. Wanting something and needing it to validate you are two different postures, and enough is what lets you hold the first one without collapsing into the second. Think about how differently you'd move through today if your worth wasn't quietly on trial the entire time. The presentation would still matter, but it wouldn't be a referendum on whether you're competent as a human being. The unanswered message would still sting a little, but it wouldn't spiral into a full accounting of whether you're likable enough to keep around. That shift doesn't make you careless. It makes you free to actually perform well, because a mind that isn't busy defending its own worth has far more room left over to focus on the actual task in front of it. Enough isn't a lower standard for your effort. It's what removes the second invisible job you've been doing all along, proving you deserve to exist. So the only job left is the one that was ever real. Comment one thing you did yesterday that actually was enough, even if nobody clapped for it but you. I rise again. The third word exists because the first two are going to fail you. Not might, will. You'll have mornings where today feels impossible and enough feels like a lie you're telling yourself. That's exactly when you need again. Here's the trap most people fall into without noticing. One bad day gets treated like proof. One missed workout becomes a skipped week. One lost temper becomes, that's just who I am. Chrysippus spent his whole career building systems of logic partly to catch exactly this mistake, drawing a permanent conclusion from a single temporary event. One failure is one data point. It's not a verdict. It never was. Marcus Aurelius wrote himself the same reminder more times than he probably wanted to admit, falling into the same irritation, the same short temper, the same lapses in discipline over and over. He didn't treat that as proof the philosophy had failed him. He just started the next entry the exact same way he started the last one, reminding himself who he was trying to be, again, no matter how many times it took. That's the real weight behind this word. It's not a soft, "I'll try to do better." It's a flat refusal to let one bad day calcify into a bad identity. You skipped the gym. That doesn't make you lazy. It makes you a person who skipped the gym once. You snapped at someone you love. That doesn't make you cruel. It makes you a person who's going to apologize and try again tomorrow morning. The failure doesn't get the final word. You do, every single time you choose to stand back up instead of staying down and calling it evidence. Say again like you mean it, not as an apology for falling short, as a promise that falling short doesn't end the story. You've probably already restarted more things this year than you're giving yourself credit for. The diet you fell off and picked back up in March, the relationship boundary you forgot to hold and then held again the very next week, the business idea you shelved for 2 months and then quietly opened the laptop back up on a random Sunday because something in you refused to let it stay closed. Nobody applauds those restarts. There's no ceremony for the 5th time you show up after the 4th time you didn't. But that's exactly where the actual character gets built. Not in the streak nobody ever breaks, because nobody has one of those, but in what you do the morning after the streak breaks anyway. Cato the Younger kept returning to work everyone else had abandoned as a lost cause, going back through it with the same seriousness the 2nd time as the 1st, and the 10th time as the 1st. He wasn't chasing a guaranteed win. He understood something most people never let themselves believe. The value was never only in whether he succeeded that particular round. It was in the fact that giving up wasn't a door he was willing to walk through, no matter how many times the day tried to hand him the key. There's a quiet myth floating around that disciplined people just don't fall off, that the people who seem to have it together simply never miss a day, never lose their temper, never fall back into an old pattern they swore off months ago. That myth is wrong, and believing it is exactly what makes one bad day feel like the end of the whole effort instead of a normal bump inside it. The actual difference was never about never falling. It was about how quickly they got back up and how little time they spent arguing with themselves about whether they deserved to. Again shortens that argument down to nothing. You fell. Fine. Get up. The rest is just noise you don't have time for this morning. There's a version of this that shows up in something as small as your morning routine. You slept through the alarm 3 days ago and told yourself the whole system was broken. It wasn't broken. You missed one day. The system was never the problem. The story you told yourself about one missed day was the problem. And that story is the only part of this that was ever optional. You could just as easily have told yourself a different one. I missed a day, and tomorrow I'm back at it, the same way I was the day before I missed it. Both stories cost you the same amount of effort to believe. Only one of them actually gets you out of bed tomorrow. Comment how many times you think you've quietly restarted something this year. The number is probably higher than you're giving yourself credit for, and every single one of those restarts counted. I move forward. The 4th word turns acceptance into motion, because accepting your circumstances and giving up on them are not the same thing, no matter how much they get confused with each other. Marcus Aurelius left behind one of the most repeated ideas in the ancient world: what blocks your path can become the path. A fire doesn't get smothered by more fuel thrown on it. It consumes that fuel and burns brighter because of it. Whatever's standing in your way this morning doesn't have to stop your progress. It can become the exact material your progress is made of if you're willing to look at it that way, instead of staring at it like a wall with no door. This isn't a comfortable idea, and it was never supposed to be. Musonius Rufus pushed his students toward discomfort on purpose, not because suffering is noble for its own sake, but because a person who's practiced moving through small discomforts voluntarily doesn't freeze the moment real difficulty shows up uninvited. Comfort, left unchecked, doesn't protect you. It just leaves you untrained for the day comfort finally runs out. You already know what today's obstacle is. You knew before you even got out of bed. The hard conversation, the deadline you're behind on, the appointment you've been dodging for weeks. Forward doesn't pretend that obstacle isn't real. It just refuses to let it function as a stop sign instead of what it actually is. Ground you're about to walk straight through. Epictetus put it plainly. Don't demand that events happen exactly the way you want them to happen the way they actually do, because that's the only alignment that ever produces real peace of mind. Forward is what that alignment looks like once it stops being a theory and starts being a decision you make with your feet. Think about the last time you actually got good at something hard. Not the version where it came easy, the version where it fought you the whole way, where you got worse before you got better, where quitting would have been the easier and more forgivable choice. That version is the only version that ever actually changed you. The obstacle wasn't the thing standing between you and the growth. The obstacle was the growth, wearing a disguise you didn't recognize until you'd already walked all the way through it. Forward is the word that lets you see the disguise for what it is before you've wasted a morning resenting it. You don't need to feel brave to move forward. Bravery is one of the great myths sold to people who are waiting to feel a certain way before they'll act, as though courage is a mood that descends on you right before the hard thing, instead of what it actually is, which is doing the hard thing while still feeling exactly as scared as you did the moment before you started. Nobody who's ever done something difficult felt entirely ready first. They moved anyway, scared, unsure, hands shaking a little, and the readiness showed up somewhere in the middle of the doing, never before it. Forward doesn't wait for the fear to leave the room. It just refuses to let the fear drive. Somewhere out there right now, someone with fewer resources than you, less time than you, and a harder set of circumstances than the ones you're dealing with is moving forward through their own version of today's obstacle without waiting for permission or perfect timing. That's not meant to guilt you. It's meant to remind you that the conditions were never actually the deciding factor, not for them and not for you. The deciding factor was always the decision to take the next step regardless of how the ground felt underneath it. You already have everything required to take one step forward today. Not the whole staircase, one step. That's the only part of forward that's ever actually due this morning. Comment the one obstacle you already know is waiting for you today, the one you've been quietly dreading since last night, because saying it out loud tends to shrink it before you've even dealt with it. I act now. The fifth word is the one every other word on this list is quietly built around: now. Seneca opened one of his most famous letters pointing out something people rarely admit to themselves. You'd fight someone who tried to take your money, your house, your car, but you hand over your actual hours to anyone who asks, without a second thought, like time is the one resource that magically refills itself. It doesn't. Every hour spent scrolling, resenting, rehearsing an argument you'll never actually have, that's an hour gone from a total nobody ever told you the size of. This is where memento mori earns its place, not as something morbid, but as something clarifying. Remembering that you won't be here forever has a strange effect. It strips away the noise fast. The petty argument you've been replaying, the task you've been avoiding out of pure avoidance, the resentment you've been feeding for weeks. None of it survives contact with the reminder that today might genuinely be one of the ones that counts. Marcus Aurelius leaned on this constantly, not to scare himself into paralysis, but to sharpen exactly what deserved his attention and what didn't. And notice this: you can't actually suffer over yesterday except by thinking about it right now. You can't fear tomorrow except by imagining it right now. Every single feeling you've ever had, good or terrible, happened exclusively in a present moment. That means the present moment is the only place your power to choose has ever actually lived. Say now, and you pull that power back into your hands instead of leaving it scattered across a past you can't edit and a future you haven't earned yet. There's a version of you who's been waiting for the right moment to send that message, start that habit, forgive that person, or finally walk away from something that stopped serving you a long time ago. That right moment isn't coming with a calendar invite. It never does. It shows up disguised as an ordinary Tuesday that felt exactly as unremarkable as every other Tuesday before you actually acted on it, and only in hindsight does it get remembered as the moment everything shifted. You don't get a preview of which ordinary morning that's going to be. You only get the choice over and over of whether to treat this one like it might be it. Here's the strange comfort hidden inside all of this. You don't need to solve your entire future today, and you never did. You just need to handle what's actually in front of you right now as honestly and fully as you can manage. That's a far smaller job than the one your anxiety has been assigning you. The one where you're supposed to have 30 years mapped out before you're allowed to feel okay about any single one of them. Now takes that oversized job off your desk and replaces it with the only job that was ever real to begin with. This hour, this task, this conversation, done with your full attention instead of half of it split off somewhere in a future that hasn't happened yet. Think about the people you love the most, the ones you'd genuinely be devastated to lose. Now think about how much of your actual time with them gets spent half present, phone in hand, mind somewhere else entirely, while the only version of them you'll ever get to keep, the version sitting right in front of you today, quietly passes by unnoticed. That's the cost of not saying now. It's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It just quietly withdraws small amounts of your life from moments that will never happen again in exactly that form, and you don't usually notice the withdrawal until much later, looking back at a stretch of years that somehow went by faster than they should have. Comment the task you've been avoiding that would take you less than 10 minutes to just finally finish. You already know which one it is before you finish reading this sentence. Notice something these 5 words all have in common underneath the differences. Not one of them requires the world's cooperation to work. Not one of them needs your boss to be reasonable, your family to understand you, your bank account to hit a certain number, or your body to feel a certain way before it activates. That's not an accident. It's the entire design. Anything that only works when your circumstances are already good isn't actually a tool, it's a luxury, and luxuries have a way of disappearing exactly when you need them the most. These 5 words were built to survive the exact conditions that strip luxuries away, because the people who first leaned on them didn't have the option of waiting for easier circumstances to show up first. 5 words. Today shrinks your whole overwhelming life down into one day you can actually carry. Enough hands back the outcomes that were never yours to control, while still demanding everything you've actually got. Again, refuses to let one bad day write your whole story. Forward turns the obstacle already waiting for you into fuel instead of a wall. Now drags your attention out of a past you can't touch and a future you haven't reached yet, back into the only moment where you've ever had any real power at all. None of these words need you to feel ready first. That's the part almost everybody gets backwards. Waiting to feel motivated, waiting for inspiration to show up right on schedule, wondering why it never quite arrives on the mornings you need it the most. The Stoics didn't operate that way, and neither should you. The feeling was never the starting point. It was always the result of moving first and letting the feeling catch up. You've probably noticed this pattern already without naming it. The days you dreaded getting out of bed for turned out fine once you were actually up and moving. The workout you didn't want to start became the one you were glad you finished. The conversation you rehearsed with dread went better once you were actually inside it than it ever did in your head beforehand. That's not a coincidence repeating itself by chance. That's proof, collected across dozens of mornings you've already lived through, that the dread shows up first and the capability shows up right behind it every single time, if you just give it the chance to catch up. So, try this tomorrow. Before you check your phone, before the first notification, before the world gets a single word in edgewise, say the 5 words to yourself. Today. Enough. Again. Forward. Now. Say them like you actually mean them, the way someone says something they've decided is true, regardless of how they happen to feel about it in that particular second. You don't need the whole day figured out before you start. You don't need every obstacle solved in advance. You need 5 words said first, before anything else gets the chance to speak into your morning instead of you. Some mornings you'll only need one of the 5. Some mornings you'll need all of them back to back, standing in front of the mirror or sitting on the edge of the bed before your feet even touch the floor. There's no wrong way to use them, as long as you use them before the noise gets there first. You don't have to say them perfectly. You don't have to feel a surge of inspiration the moment they leave your mouth. Some mornings they'll land flat, and you'll say them anyway, because the value was never in how they felt in that particular second. It was in the fact that you chose to speak before the world did. That's a discipline, not a performance. Nobody's grading how convincing you sound to yourself at 6 in the morning. What matters is that the words got said, that you claimed the first move, that the day started on your terms instead of on the terms of whatever showed up first on your screen. Nobody builds this kind of discipline by waiting for the hard days to show up before practicing it. You build it on the ordinary mornings, the boring ones, the ones that don't feel like they matter, specifically so it's already strong on the day that actually tests you. That's the whole point of a ritual like this. You're not performing it for the easy stretch. You're building it for the morning that isn't easy at all, so that when it eventually arrives, you'll already have 5 words ready that nothing outside you can take away. Because none of the 5 ever depended on your circumstances agreeing to cooperate in the first place. You've survived every hard morning you've ever had so far, every single one. That's not a coincidence, and it's not luck running out eventually. It's evidence of something in you that keeps showing back up no matter how many times the day tried to talk you out of it. Tomorrow is just one more morning asking the same question every morning before it has asked. Will you let it speak first, or will you? Picture the 2 versions of tomorrow morning sitting side by side. In the first one, the phone lights up before your eyes are even fully open, and by the time you're standing in the kitchen, you've already absorbed 3 headlines, 1 passive-aggressive message, and a wave of comparison from a stranger's highlight reel, and none of it was your choice. It just happened to you the way weather happens to you. In the second one, you're standing in that same kitchen, but the first 5 things that entered your mind today were things you put there yourself. Same kitchen, same coffee, same actual circumstances waiting outside the door. Completely different day, because the day didn't start with you reacting. It started with you deciding. That's the whole trade being offered here, and it costs you almost nothing to take it. 5 words, a few seconds, no equipment, no membership, no perfect conditions required. You can do this broke or comfortable, exhausted or rested, in a mansion or in a room you're not sure you can afford next month. The Stoics built these ideas specifically so that circumstance couldn't gatekeep them, because if the words only worked for people with easy lives, they would have died out a long time ago, along with everyone who first said them. They didn't die out. They got carried forward by people who had every excuse to let them go, and they're still here this morning waiting for you to pick them up the same way. Nobody is coming to hand you a perfect morning. Nobody is going to build this discipline for you while you wait for the right circumstances to make it easier. It was never going to get easier before you started. It gets easier because you started, the same way every discipline works, backwards from how it feels like it should. You already have the only two things this actually requires: a morning that's going to happen whether you're ready or not, and 5 words short enough to say before you've even fully opened your eyes. That's the whole toolkit. Nobody is more qualified to use it than you are right now, exactly as you are, with exactly what you've got. Comment which one of these 5 words you're leading with tomorrow, and if you think someone else needs to hear it more than you do right now, tag them and make them read it too. If even one line here gave you something worth carrying into tomorrow, that's the entire reason this channel exists in the first place. Subscribe if you want the next one waiting for you before the world wakes up and starts talking first.